when we look at some of these global enterprises, every company now has to have software and digital as a core capability. That there's going to be more software in the future, not less, which is going to create more channels and marketplaces and new types of consumer behavior, not less. And that is really challenging the fundamental logic of this long plateau that firms have had for a generation or more. And so as they rethink their response to those channels, they're looking at rethinking what does it mean for the CIO, the CMO. Do we kind of merge departments together? Do we rethink them top to bottom, or all of the above? But a lot of what we're seeing is that the activities, the core activities around customer acquisition, market research, and increasingly more specific user research is all being, in many cases, recentered around the office of the CMO to focus on acquisition strategies across channels, monetization, and even more importantly, retention as new entrants and competitors enter the market very quickly. And so digital products support all phases of these user journeys, customer journeys, and there's many new opportunities for direct relationship with the brand. We've worked on a lot of direct-to-consumer initiatives and increasingly looking at all the data that is a result of these interactions and how do you mine that to really develop kind of bespoke per consumer, per transaction strategies. And so at a high level, there's 3 dominant models I thought I'd spend some time sharing with folks today. Some of them depend on where you feel your firm is on the maturity index, as we would say. First, I'll talk about this internal agency model. Next, we'll kind of go into some of our experience working with these external incubators, where in some senses, many of these large firms are creating an entirely separate organization with a different business charter so that it's completely separate physically, culturally, and financially from the parent company. And then lastly, I'll dive into when firms are further along in this maturity curve, maybe say years 3 or 4 or 5 of a journey, how are they really reshaping a new department with a new C-level leader, chief digital officer, and looking at the digital services department. And so, you know, the internal agency, one of the things that we've seen is firms that are just looking to increase this feedback loop in learning. So when I was in New York 10 years ago, you know, the observation and judgment was that at its worst, having a vendor management strategy would have vendors or agency partners owning areas that were a black box to the firm. And so the kind of knowledge gap there created this dependence. And what we're seeing now, or what we've seen over the last 5 years with this internal agency approach is, one, just to improve some competition, quality and competition across the agency model, where the internal agency is meant to increase the kind of time or decrease the time to learn new tech and to understand when to bring capabilities in-house and what to leverage agencies for, but to also kind of keep agencies a little bit more honest that there is an in-house alternative and that we really want to focus on some strong value adds with those relationships or specific market kind of intelligence. And then the second is just this kind of developing a better feedback loop between the underlying business units themselves and developing this kind of longer term focus on really having in-house partners that can help translate more complex business opportunities to the agency ecosystem. And so I probably won't win any awards for my design on some of these slides here, but just trying to give a bird's eye view of the idea where when we're dealing with a company that has multiple brands or product lines, or is segmented into kind of specific market geographies, that understanding where the kind of learning goals for the agency are we trying to get better at social? Are we trying to get better at kind of launching companion applications? What is the core focus for that agency? And what is its emphasis in terms of, creating more leverage in geographies, the ability to react in geography or a market, extended capability, or just put capacity. A lot of times what we find is these kind of early innovation labs have very smart people in them, but they don't have clear funding lines or charters. They're kind of hunting around large organizations and lines of business to try to add value. And they're not really structured to be successful. And so with an internal agency model, getting your hand on an actual funded project And being able to use agency partners to put leverage on more kind of strategic direction from the in-house agency, it helps the external agencies work better with the brand that may not be experts in user research or in product design. And so essentially the funding comes down from the parent company, the brands or the product lines through projects. And essentially we would call those vertical funding lines. And then through the execution of those, try to get better at kind of broader shared capabilities like user research. You don't want those deliverables just stuck with an agency deliverable for a project. And then the return back to the organization is the learnings that are managed and kind of educated through the internal agency. And again, we've seen this work with kind of large hotel chains that could have a web presence for every hotel or every kind of branded credit card or promotion, and then have shared assets like a rewards app. And it can be very inefficient to manage all of the different initiatives as marketing initiatives without kind of a product owner. And as project budgets, there's just a lot of soft cost and waste in terms of paying for the same type of research just for a different brand over and over again. There's no central repository that the internal agency can be a starting point in consolidating. And as we look on to the next one, this one is much more sophisticated, the external incubator agency. I think, for those of you that have read the Lean Startup book, there was a lot of books that followed that on how do we do this lean startup stuff at scale? So if it works for kind of back of envelope, new tech ideas, how do you take that into a large organization that already has very mature structures but tends to move more slowly? And, that's kind of modeled against just the basic physics of how the venture capital world works. So, the thesis we've seen work the best here is where you're in a 100-year or 50-plus year industry that has very entrenched kind of ways of doing things, and you need to create a real physical separation for an opportunity. With the idea being that the dynamic is that by the time most companies see their competitors in the rear view mirror, they're already passing, right, the legacy firm. So creating a physically separate space with a kind of a business case charter, forcing throughput as the key business metric over scale. We're trying to do things quickly that can be handed to the more mature aspects of the parent company or to create a new brand or product line offering. And it requires a really different financing model. And so one of the key things, my background isn't really in marketing. I came from the digital products world. And, one of the things I really learned early in my career is that many of the ways that things get built really reflect the way that they're paid for. So if you pay for things in stages, people build things in stages. If you pay for ongoing capacity, you kind of can adapt and move more. And so in this model of progressive investment, the idea, and I'll go to the next slide here, is that the incubator model, the external kind of innovation company model, has a VC level charter. It has a set of throughput metrics which look at progressive investment for developing ideas as they make it through certain validated toll gates. And in that model, what they're essentially trying to do is start with a business case, not a project for a brand. Leverage the assets of the existing brand, the existing access to customers, physical brick and mortar if that's relevant to the industry. But what they're really looking to do is explore what kind of digital products enable the channels that service the new business model. And based on the success of that either kind of can get reconciled into a brand or can become a new digital product that can be co-opted by brands. And a lot of this, what we're seeing kind of 5 years later, is that this also almost becomes like a mini business school for the retraining of new executives. So that as kids are either coming out of business school or coming out of their own career path within a brand, they can cycle through the incubator, live through digital product development life cycles, launch and react to the market post-launch on the success or failure of those initiatives, and then take that way of thinking and working back into the legacy brand. These models can leverage what I mentioned before on the kind of inside agency that could work more closely. with the development of these, and then help with external agency partners enable the efforts of the brand. And then the other side thing that we've seen grow out of this, that again, I won't win awards for my graphic design here, but this concept of a sandbox. So one of the dynamics we've noticed is that, and again, we do a decent amount of work with some of the event sponsors here, like Radar. There's a lot of new technology that can get confronted, get presented to brands. But even in terms of understanding how that technology will work with legacy systems, or how it will change, how different things have to get done to enable a certain digital idea or customer experience, it can cost a lot of time, energy, attention, and even budgets to build that out. And so one of the things we've seen incubators doing really well that helps shorten that runway is building what's called a sandbox, essentially replicating all of the technology systems that would support a hotel. So if you wanted to, for example, if you were a large hotel chain, if you wanted to detect a traveler walking into the lobby who had your loyalty app or companion app running, see if they had an open reservation, and send them a text message to say, just drop your bags here and here's your room, and you can open the room with your phone. The ability to test that kind of idea and all of the third-party technologies you could license to do that can be a very kind of cumbersome thing to do if there isn't an existing sandbox infrastructure. And so we've seen some of these secondary kind of operational benefits come out of the work of these incubators, which are more than just new kind of product or service lines or new digital scaffolding for helping more quickly enable a channel. And again, when you think about the effect of Tesla on the automotive industry, and the idea of having a companion app is a car in the future, a service, and a subscription that you identify with a brand where you get different types of cars when you need it, as opposed to an asset that you own and have maintenance on. And so when you think about the totality of the user experience, from thinking about the car you want, configuring it, designing it, previewing that, potentially even virtually test driving that, and then having an companion application to manage that entire relationship. These are the kind of things where if you look at, say, the silver car business unit that was developed under Audi, these are business case experiments that become profitable businesses that then can inform the future of changing consumer relationships in things where 10 years ago, no one would have thought subscription services for vehicles could be as close as they are today with brands launching them. And the role of these digital products become almost as important as the design, what used to be the design of a dealership. That we're seeing this massive trend in the industry where licensing third-party kind of app skinning experiences, as opposed to designing from the ground up, completely beautiful experience. If you think about what Starbucks did with their rewards app versus these kind of white labeled platforms. The brands are taking this experience seriously. They're seeing it as integral to customer acquisition, and it's growing from being an initiative to really something that is a product owner, and in some cases a separate business line sponsor. And then the other thing, and this was kind of, this is again, I won't win awards for my designs here, but the idea of how do you kind of abstract the three layers of how to fund progressive investment strategy. So 10 years ago when I was in New York doing a lot of meetups with folks running innovation labs, there were some emerging models because of the, one of the interesting things about New York is because you've got Wall Street there, you got a lot of interesting cross-pollination between innovation teams in New York and folks that really know a lot about ways to kind of hack finance and legacy businesses, but also think progressively about where this needs to go. And so there were three clear lanes of activity that I think some of these external incubators help solidify. The first is there's this kind of very low-cost, no-cost way to just encourage ideation and collaboration, prototyping, kind of within lines of business. But giving folks visibility that there are ways to go beyond the high level of idea validation or developing some new kind of thesis into ways to get smaller budgets, to build prototypes, do some user research, try to get an MVP level product out into the market, and then make it through different investment criteria to really develop a line of business. And again, this was a framework that I think came out a high level of teams at Goldman Sachs. that had this entire concept around funding models for innovation and really looking at these test predict phases of just creating awareness, getting conversations moving, encouraging cross-department collaboration. Then the next level would be something where a more kind of friendly competition across teams to develop and prove ROI potential and ideas, and then have some more significant budgets to really develop and emerge these as potential lines of business or digital products. The last one, and what we're seeing with firms that now have been at this, again, firms that are operating in 6 global markets and have tens or hundreds of thousands of employees, it can take a couple of years just to actually execute on a new organizational structure. And one of the most mature of these that we're seeing is this digital services department. And so what's interesting about it is primarily when we're meeting with these teams, their customers are driven from the sales and marketing side of the business. They are heavily integrated with deep technology, but they have a specific set of platforms and products that they themselves own, control, and then offer to their peers in sales marketing on the brand side. And in order to do that, they have to have a deep technical integration, more so than you would think, in terms of like building a one-off website or small web application or mobile app. These are things that are going through almost every layer of the technology organization, but not trying to subsume the totality of the responsibilities of a CTO or a CIO. And so this visualization in digital services is really looking at, we have a fully integrated department at the first order level of traditional IT, marketing, sales departments. It is looking at, from a finance perspective, its charter is to quickly engage new channels, so the time enablement of a new channel, but also lowering the incremental cost for any brand or initiative to use that channel. And so the idea would be that there's a strategic set of decisions. If we look at, say, launching a reservation system, we're launching a branded hotel website, having a digital scaffolding that's already been through security infrastructure kind of setup, having this department run what would be called an API roadmap, essentially any new unique offering that you would want to do through this digital channel would be managed in terms of a quarter-over-quarter basis of when are those integrations being done that other maybe traditional CTO or CIO department teams would own. Platform choices like HubSpot or Salesforce or the CRM layer, really kind of looking at that, not from an enablement of the sales team workflow perspective, but as a piece of enterprise architecture that is really collecting all the data from the consumer channels and preparing it into large data lakes and data warehouses for more advanced data science and marketing. And then the channels that I think a lot of folks are very familiar with in terms of what is running the content management system and asset management at scale, and then building what I would refer to as digital scaffolding for these kind of application building components, so design systems, UI component libraries. And so this kind of flow of conversation and budget essentially moves the digital services department, in many cases, would be a strong partner to the internal digital agency or to external agencies that are now going to build those experiences on top of this digital scaffolding. And the idea there is it recenters really balance and control of what the core tech the agencies build on is now in-house set of decisions by the digital services department. And then it really focuses on that last mile of customization is what brands can more effectively partner with external agencies or on specific geographic market platforms. And it's this, age-old idea that there's a lot of focus on what you see, what goes into the hand of your customer, what screen are they looking at in whatever channel. But the under the waterline piece of this iceberg continues to grow and be an integrated set of responsibilities or legacy departments that need to be more effectively coordinated for firms to more effectively compete. And so again, it's when we're engaging with a brand that has a very strong, market presence and legacy model, we hear the word beyond a lot. We're evolving from hotel brand to travel experience, or we're evolving from a company that sells you pills to a company that beyond the pill to health outcomes. And so these more holistic kind of end-to-end relationships and conversations between brand and consumer disintermediate previous channels like selling through brick and mortar retail to have your own direct relationship, really require real elevation of the operational structure to consistently deliver these digital experiences in ways that build off of things that are working and don't increase the liability side of data breaches and all the things that can really erode quickly brand trust. So I guess my parting thoughts, folks, here are, it's really reinforced by the year that we all just kind of came through, and looking forward this year, that digital products are enabling the channels that really are owning the customer experience and have been prioritized as the world kind of reacted to the pandemic. That understanding where your firm is on its multi-year journey, balancing the fact that these are big decisions that can't necessarily be made quickly, but a sense of urgency to try to identify pilots to guide the way is important. And when done right, creates a high degree of political visibility on wins that help model strength throughout the organization. And that the metrics that seem to matter here are less about the cost to build something, but the time to build it and the amount of throughput and learnings and new kind of shared assets for making smarter decisions.